I was there for about 2 years, and I've been told by someone at the staff that my Q rating was very high. It was as high as our news anchors and our weather guy, which happened pretty quickly, and which was unusual because a man of color down south. I got my death threats the first month I was on the air down there,
man,
which was unbelievable to get that first. You know, you're in Market 112. You answer the phone. So when the phone rings in the newsroom, there's no receptionist. It's you answer the phone. So I pick up the phone one night, and this guy says, "Hey, is Chick Hernandez there?" I go, "Yeah, you got him." Hey, how long are you going to be there? And I'm like, "Well, I get off the air at 1:30 or 11:30." He goes, "Well, I don't mean how long tonight. I mean how long you going to be in town?" Because I suggest, these are the direct quote, "I suggest you leave sooner rather than later.
Wow.
Or I'm going to kill your black ass."
Live from the streets of Washington, D.C., on the corner where sports and culture meets hip-hop. Sharing stories of the DMV and spitting fire for the whole damn country. This is First and Told with Chad Ricardo and Darrell Bucknight.
What up, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to First and Told. I tell you what, Darrell, it's been a long time since I've seen you. I see you growing out your hair and growing out your beard. Married life is doing good to you, but we can get to our personal lives a little bit later on because we got a very, very special guest in the building here today.
We sure do. The hair is growing out, the beard is growing out, and look, I did this. This is for Chick. I wanted to look good. I get good for Chick Hernandez. Look, Chick Hernandez, he's an Emmy-winning sports anchor whose presence has graced the DMV for decades and whose voice has been heard across countless platforms across the nation, from Fox 5 to NBC Sports Washington, and now with me at CBS Sports Network here in New York City. You've surely heard the voice of the man we have the pleasure of joining us on this podcast. This episode is the First and Told podcast. But you might not know his incredible story, his whole life story, and we hope to get into that a little bit today. So with gratitude, we welcome Chick Hernandez, the one and only Chick Hernandez, to First and Told.
That's what's up.
Yeah, you don't want to know my whole life story because there's some stuff in there that just should never get out. We'll start giving up my government name and stuff like that. We can't do that. But it's my pleasure. My pleasure, and always good to have, you know, I mean, I can see DB with the goatee. Mine's a little gray right now. I might take it off for the broadcast, make them think that I'm a little bit younger.
There it is.
That was one of the deals I had at NBC Sports Washington. Was it was in my contract that my age was not revealed, literally, because executives make decisions based on age sometimes, even though they don't want to admit it. You know, I'm 102 years old, guys. I'm 102.
Well, Chick, you look damn good for 102, brother. And before we get into that life story of yours, one of the things that we like to do here, we call First and Told the intersection where sports meets music, as well as all sorts of social things as well. So the first thing that you got to do is give us your top 5 musical artists of all time, and you only got 30 seconds to do it.
Top 5?
Top 5, bro.
Prince, Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston.
Ooh. Two more.
Earth, Wind, and Fire, and Stevie Wonder.
There it is, bro.
Stevie came to my high school back when I was a senior.
Did he?
Wow.
Spent 2 hours talking to us when he was trying to. This is 1981, boys. He was trying to get the Dr. King's birthday into a holiday, national holiday. What? And so his people called around the DMV looking for the most racially balanced school in the area. And they said, y'all want to go to Blair up at 313 Wayne Avenue in Silver Spring. They got 99 different nationalities. And we did. And he came up and he spoke and sang for 2 hours, which is indelibly marked in my memory. I've got a picture of it. I used to impersonate Stevie at the coffee house. Wow. So our speech teacher, you know, look, when you get a half a day of school, I mean, what are you doing? Half a day of school. You're bolting. You're out of there, right? And my speech teacher said, no, we have an assembly today, so it's a half a day of school. And then she kind of turned and looked me dead in the pupils and said, and now, well, I had several different names in high school. For this particular class, my name was Moses.
Okay.
It's a long story. And so she just looked at me and said, Moses, I really think you should be going to the assembly today. And I was like, what? But the way she looked at me was like, something ain't right.
Sure.
And as soon as the bell rang, got down in my locker and was putting my books, I was ready to bolt. And somebody said, did y'all hear? Stevie Wonder is in the industrial arts class right now.
Wow.
Like, what? So beeline down, center seat, front row, watched 2 hours. And then I got a chance to meet him a few years later when I was doing concert security. Yeah, he's my dude. He was the guy. Songs from the Key of Life, that album set got me through high school. I learned every song. I still got them in my noggin. And whenever I hear the music, it takes me right back to high school.
Listen, Moses, as we may call you at least for the next 2 minutes here, Moses, Darrell and I would not be the journalists that we aspire to be if we didn't ask you right now to give us that Stevie impersonation.
No chance. No, the voice has changed. Okay. No, the voice is much higher back then. Okay. So, yes. No, but I had the sunglasses. Now, there's two things. I'm going to tell you a quick story. There's two things. Stevie Wonder is a figure eight, okay? The head, it's a figure eight, okay? Ray Charles is a leaner, okay? So I'm doing concert security for Stevie Wonder, and it's at the beginning of music videos. And they say, hey, we need somebody to go for the sound check and just sit by the camera that's in the crowd. It's a robotic camera. Just to protect the camera, even though nobody's supposed to be in the building, protect it. Got it. I said, I'm in. This is my dude. I go, I sit, he comes out, starts playing his, getting the sound check done, and he starts playing around. And then he just starts into this Ray Charles impression, and he's singing Georgia on My Mind.
Wow.
And I'm like, not only is he hitting, he sounded like, Jamie Foxx doing Ray Charles.
Sure.
But the blind man started to do the lean.
Wow.
And my brain went, I was like, wait a minute, how does the one blind man know what the other blind man does when he sings? To this day, I never got a chance to ask him, obviously. I don't know, because that doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't compute. But no impressions of the voices drop, man, and we can't do that.
I got you.
Yeah. No, to add on to that, Stevie Wonder is also my favorite artist of all time. Chad doesn't know who Stevie Wonder is.
I'm sorry, what?
Chick, I'm sorry, what? Chick, this is a running bit that Darrell likes to do. He's got an old soul, so he likes to tell guests this. Pay no attention to him.
I could leave right now because I don't know if I can continue.
They have no mind. I was a late adapter to Stevie Wonder. I will admit that. I was an Al Green man. Al Green played in my house, so I was Al Green until I was in my 20s. But I've been listening to Stevie longer than Darrell's been born. So,
if for a refresher, just go to Songs from the Key of Life and just play that entire four-side album set on your phone and just listen and enjoy. Simple as that.
I'll do that at least. I don't know if Chad will, but I'll do that. So, Chick, it's, like we said, it's such a pleasure to have you here, and it's fun we're going to get to know you, and we're going to, chop it up a little bit and talk sports and talk life. But let's start kind of with the genesis of Chick Hernandez, not necessarily you being born at Providence Hospital at birth, that genesis, but
looking back, where's Popo at?
But the Chick Hernandez who was born in D.C., eventually moved to Maryland, is a DMV guy through and through. Silver Spring, obviously you went to Montgomery Blair, the original Montgomery Blair.
The original, yes, sir.
The original. 3-sport athlete there, if I'm correct. Baseball, swimming, and football.
Correct.
What did you ever picture back then, after Montgomery Blair, class of 1981, after UMD, that you would be back in the DMV in your hometown, calling games, being in studio, covering teams that maybe you watched growing up and athletes that you watched and admired growing up? Did you ever picture that for yourself?
I think it was probably a hope at some point, but I certainly didn't entertain it to come as quickly as it did. I was down in Augusta, Georgia as a sports director at the CBS affiliate there. It's where I got my addiction to golf. You cover the Masters every year but I'm the sports director, so I'm the dude. That's my first real job, and I'm the guy who's going to decide who's going where, who's covering what. Friday Night Football was an absolute, can you curse on this?
You can say whatever the hell you want to.
Yeah, it was a shit show. It was great, but it was a shit show. We're talking.
There we go.
11, 15, 12, 13, 14 games, to cover on a Friday night, both in Georgia and South Carolina. And in Georgia, those small towns, the saying was you could go ahead and pillage every house you want on a Friday night because there was nobody there. They're all at the stadium, right? I was there for about 2 years, and I've been told by someone at the staff that my Q rating was very high. It was as high as our news anchors and our weather guy, which happened pretty quickly, and which was unusual because a man of color down south, I got my death threats the first month I was on the air down there, man, which was unbelievable to get that first. You're in Market 112. You answer the phone. So when the phone rings in the newsroom, there's no receptionist. It's you answer the phone. So I pick up the phone one night, and this guy says, "Hey, is Chick Hernandez there?" I go, "Yeah, you got him." "Hey, how long are you going to be there?" And I'm like, "Well, I get off the air at 1:30 or 11:30." He goes, "Well, I don't mean how long tonight. I mean how long are you going to be in town? Because I suggest," these are the direct quote, "I suggest you leave sooner rather than later. Wow. Or I'm going to kill your black ass."
Wow.
And I went, "Oh," and I hung up the phone, and I just stood there kind of stunned. And my news anchor, who was like, for folks in DC, Gordon Peterson was the bell cow of all news anchors, right? This guy, Rick Sykes in Augusta, was the same thing in Augusta. He was from Augusta, a white man who saw my face, came over and said, "You all right?" And I'm like, "I just got a death threat, Rick." He goes, "You got a what?" "I got a death threat." "What'd they say?" I told him what he said, and he goes, he saw it in my face. He's like, "Look, dude, my people are stupid. I get death threats, and I'm a white guy. Don't worry about it." And it kind of just relaxed me. So became popular. I kind of had some leverage when it came to the new contract, and I exercised that leverage to get a nice bump in pay, an unusual bump at that point. But I also told the news director that I'm looking to head out. One of the things in my contract was a top 10 out, and he looked at me like, "Okay, Market 112, yeah, you're going to top 10." I'm like, just wanted in there in case it pops up. And then out of the blue, literally, not to be too long-winded here, my friend of mine called me from back here, who said that Gus Johnson was leaving Fox 5. He heard it on the radio. And he said, "Gus Johnson's leaving Fox 5. You might be able to get that job." And I said, "You're drunk. There's no chance I'm getting that job. It's Market 7. I'm in Market 112. You don't make that leap." I hung up on him. I was ticked off. I'm like, does he not understand my business? Of course he didn't. And then about half an hour later, I was like, you know what? At least I should send a tape and see, give me a critique. At least ask for the critique. So I'd had an agent at that point. Through James Brown, one of my mentors, and we sent the tape, and this ain't like today, Chad. Sure. It ain't like today where you can send a link,
right?
You got to get a physically made. It was I think a 3/4 inch tape, right, and then send it, get it to the post office, wrap it up, send it out, hope that news director sees it. Not like today where they just click the link and go 8 seconds in, I like him, don't like him. Now it's hope they look at it. I got a call like a week later from my agent, and he was screaming in the phone, they want you for an interview. I'm like, okay. So I drove my red Geostorm 10 hours. I wasn't making enough money and didn't fly down there. I should have flown. Sure. Drove down. I met them and got the job. So long story short, worked there for almost 3 years. And I sent the tape, like I said, to Fox 5. And Steve Buckhantz and the news director at the time, Phil Metlin, saw it. They talked about it. They'd gotten a bunch of tapes and said, "Local kid, got a little edge to him." I came from JB and Glenn Brenner at Channel 9 way back in the day. So I had a sense of humor. And they offered me the job. And I literally, they said, the only caveat is, this was on a Thursday. "We need you here Sunday." And I'm like, and I knew the market. So Sunday? That's a half-hour show. And we need you to come in and co-host the half-hour show. I'm like, oh, God.
Wow.
So I came in, and I had to make an appearance on the 10 o'clock news as the new weekend sports anchor. So I didn't call any of my friends. I did call my mother and said, "Here's the deal. I'm coming up. I got a job at Fox 5. She was obviously very excited. And I said, "I need a place to stay for a little bit while I find my, house or place to live." I didn't tell a soul that I was doing this until that day when I texted my peoples. I got a very close-knit group of guys I've known since first grade we picked more guys up in junior high than high school. So there's about 15 to 20 of us, a very strong connection. And I texted them on a text chain and said, hey, you guys need to check out Fox 5 tonight because they're going to run a piece of mine from Augusta. Now, these guys had never seen me work, really. Never really seen me on TV. So I said, Fox 5 is using a piece from Augusta. You got to tune in. And I told them, 10:47 when the sports comes on, right? And so I'm sitting there on the desk with Morris Jones and somebody else. And Morris goes, all right, here now the newest member of our Fox 5 sports team, Chick Hernandez, a D.C., Maryland native. And the rookie forgot to turn his phone off. And here come the texts. Ding, 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 ding. Not a good sight. Not a good first night. I basically told Morris, I'm sorry, excuse me, my lawyer's calling. Let me just turned it off. And then of course, all the messages were like, you son of a gun. I can't believe you did this. You pulled this off. And I met them later on that night. So it was never, I just didn't think, DB, that it would be, that I would be that quick. Very fortunate. Yeah. I mean, sent one tape to Augusta, sent one tape to D.C., and the rest was history. It was there from in D.C. from 94, 6 years at Fox 5, and then gave birth to what was then Comcast Sportsnet and NBC Sports Washington until 2018.
Right. Is it true I read this, that you were in a taxi and did you tell the taxi driver that you got a job at Fox 5, but you were in market 112 and you're in market 7 now, and the taxi driver was like, shut up, that's not true. What are you talking about?
No, what happened was, because I was in and out at Fox 5, for the interview. I came in, met Buck, who's now one of my closest friends. Gus was there. Gus Johnson was there, but Gus was already on his way out. He wanted to do play-by-play, which obviously he's done a tremendous job with that. And a couple of producers. And so I was there all day long, and then, somewhere around, I don't know what time. I didn't stay for the 10 o'clock news, but I was out of there by 6 o'clock. And I was in a taxi, and I said, yeah, I just interviewed for a job, and blah, blah, blah. And the taxi driver was like, oh, man, I really hope you get it. And my brain's like, yeah, dude, this is not happening. I was like,
sure.
I appreciate it, but you drive a taxi. You have no idea what you're talking about now. I wish I'd gotten that taxi driver on the way back. But no, nobody would believe that, I grew up watching, Glenn, George at Channel 4, Herzog at Channel 7, and I was a TV addict. So I listened and watched the whole time. And when I was an intern, as I tell places that I go speak, that want to be in our business, go get an internship at a local station. It's going to teach you two things. One, how to do it, and two, whether or not you have the aptitude to do it. And my first few weeks at Channel 9 with Glenn Brenner, I knew it. I was like, this is what I want to do. I'm sitting there ripping copy. There was no prompter. It was prompter, but it was physical paper, but I'm ripping copies for the producer, the director, and for Glenn. And I'm looking down at the script going, I can do this. And it's just a matter of, getting your breaks.
Right. Speaking, you just alluded to growing up and wondering or knowing whether you could do it or not. Going back to school, kind of, you've admitted, you talked about Moses earlier in that story. You've admitted that you were the class clown in
12
school.
years.
Yeah, 12 years. And you had teachers come up to you years afterwards and say, yeah, you were bad in class.
It was bad. I admit it. Look, I was a class clown from grades 1 through 12. It was a goal of mine. After I didn't know I was doing it the first, 6 years, but then when I got older, I said, I'm going to work on my material. So I didn't, when I first met Tiger Woods, he would brag about how little he slept. I'm going, that's nothing. I sleep. I was a 4-hour sleep guy. It was, in elementary school, staying up till 1 o'clock in the morning watching Johnny Carson, and then the next day doing that routine in the classroom, filtering it in here and there. But you're right. I think on our 10-year or 20-year, no, probably 10-year reunion, I was already back in town, Is that right? So 81, 91. Yeah, I was back in town. And actually 20-year reunion. It's 20-year reunion. So now I'm, sportscaster, blah, 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 TV guy. And, again, very tight-knit group of guys from all the way up from first grade. So we rented a hotel room where the reunion was going to take place at. So we had rooms. It was all set up, and we went down as a group. And we hung out. And then we had really cool teachers. We invited them to the reunion. And they're sitting over there in the corner and like, oh, look, there's Mrs. Mazes and Dr. Schultz and all these guys. And I'm looking at them. They're pointing back at us. It looked like a rumble for a second. I'm like, what's going on here? And then all of a sudden they started walking over and they said, Mr. Hernandez. And I'm like, here I am with my guys. And they're like, yeah. I said, hey, listen, we really proud of what you become. And I'm going, thanks. I appreciate it. Blah, blah, blah. And then they said, well, we got to be honest with you. I'm like, where are we going here? And he said, they said, you are very, very difficult to teach. Now, of course, my guys are like, they just start laughing. And, I'm like, well, hold on a second. Why are you coming to me like you were very difficult to teach because you were the class clown. And they said, we would go into the teacher's lounge during our breaks and compare notes. Did you hear what Hernandez said today? What did he say in your class? Wow. And they said, because if they laughed one time, then the class was mine.
That's right.
They couldn't do it. So they would bite their lips, bite their tongue, and then go into that to the teacher's lounge and go, holy crap. Like he just, so it was, wow. Yeah, it was interesting. I admit I was a disruptive force. I was a disruptive force in kindergarten. They separated me and my best friend and made two classrooms. They put a partition up in the classroom because we were so out of control. So, yeah, I was that guy. I'm kind of proud of it, but I applaud teachers and what they have to go through. I don't think I could have taught myself by any stretch of the imagination.
Chick, I sit here and I look at you and I listen to the words that you're saying, and it's so dope for me because I see so much crossover in terms of how it is that we grew up in terms of personality-wise. And obviously, we've got a bit of some career crossover, but we'll get to that a little bit later on. But I can't imagine how much it would have benefited my life had I met someone like you earlier in my life who could have shown me that someone who came from such a background could one day make it to where it is that you've made it throughout your entire career. So again, just on behalf of everybody that's watching this, thank you for everything that you've accomplished. Now I want to ask you this. I know that I watched where you spoke about the fact that when you first got your first television job, that you didn't feel like in that moment that you were ready. My question for you is, how did you get there?
It is, you're right. I was literally as a production assistant. I would hang out with the anchors at the Ms. Lou Sports News Network, and I eventually was doing the overnight shift, 12 to 8 or 12 to 9 in the morning, getting tapes and stuff ready for the morning producer because we did a show at 11 o'clock in the morning. We were the ESPN News before ESPN News.
Yeah, man.
And I would do that job, and then when the anchors came in for the 11 o'clock show, they come in at 9 o'clock. I would hang out with them, and then when the afternoon anchors came in, I would hang out with them. So I was there from midnight to 6 p.m. Go home, nearly crash, getting sleepy in the car, have a meal, and then get my 4 hours and go right back to work. The math doesn't work there, by the way, but close enough. So when I got during that time in Ms. Lou, the higher ups said, this kid should be one of the anchors. And they said, we want to put you on air. I'm like, oh, I want to do that, but you got to be kidding me.
Sure.
There's no chance I can do what they're doing right now. And they said, well, you talk their lingo. They're comfortable with you.
Yeah.
Is it something we want to do? I said, I do want to do it. And then they made me, I said, let me report for a little bit. So I did 2 stories, one on Dave Parker, the Cobra baseball player, and I got the Caps 6 overtime game. And I did those 2 stories, and they said, those are great. Let's put you on the air. Let's get you rehearsing, which is never good when you're in a network, because the last thing that the crews want to do is do a show and then have some schmo come in and sit down on and do a run through. So that didn't work out. I mean, I was horrible, but I I was just straight laced. There was no humor whatsoever. And they said, "Screw it, we're putting you on the air with Wally Bruckner," who was eventually went to Channel 4. Wally's another good friend of mine. And we did within an hour. We're supposed to go to tape after that hour, and Wally said, "All right." Or as the producer said, "All right, we're on tape," and Wally said, "What? What are you talking about?" It's like Crash Davis. I'm Crash Davis catching Ebby LaLouche over here, the rookie. We're going for another hour. So we did 2 hours, and it felt like 2 minutes. I felt good about it. When I got off the set, the whole newsroom clapping. The owners of the network who were in New York called. There's a phone hanging out the window or at the doorway for me. They say, "Young man, great job, blah, blah." I'm like, okay, cool. But I anchored for like 4 months, but it was no humor. It was like ABC, get off. ABC, just be straight, get the facts right, no humor. And then we went bankrupt, and so I'm out without a job for 8 months when I get that Augusta thing. So I go down for the Augusta interview, and I walk in, and the news director says, "Listen, here's what we want to do. Our news anchors are here. Now it is 10 o'clock in the morning. Their first show's at 6 p.m. She says, the news anchors are here and the weather guy's here. Why don't you write like a 2-minute sportscast and then come on down to the set and we'll see the chemistry." I'm thinking, okay. So I'm like, I go to this area and start writing, and it just dawned on me. I'm like, I am in Augusta, Georgia. Ain't nobody going to see this.
Right.
Let me just let it rip. Let me just do it. I don't have to be nuts and bolts straight. Let's just let it rip. So I wrote the show, had the highlights, and by the time we were done, the weather guy, Bob Smith, was on the floor on all fours, laughing. And the 2 news anchors were laughing. And I'm literally trying to do the end of my sportscast. And finally I said to the director, "You got to take a 4 shot because you're killing me right now. There's one guy on the floor and 2 news anchors, and they're killing me." And they took the 4 shot, and you can't even see Bob. You can hear him, but you can't see him. Come back upstairs, and the news director says, "We'll get back to you."
Wow.
Unbeknownst to me, they had decided, because of my resume tape from Ms. Lou, which was really sharp looking as a network, they had decided that they were going to hire me. I didn't. I was too young in the business to know that. And it was good that I let it rip. So I even showed them a different side of me. And when I got the job and drove back into town in my red Geostorm, about 30 minutes out, I just am stunned. I look up, and there's a billboard with all 4 of us on there. So
wow.
The reason that they wanted me to go on the set wasn't to do a demo, do an audition. It was to get the picture, because they had said they'd already hired me in their minds and put me on that board. So they say, and then the newspaper was like, "Chicks, Hernandez from Washington, D.C., coming to Augusta, Georgia, blah, blah, blah." I had no idea what was going on. I'm too young. I didn't know. But that was the kind of the moment that it flipped for me, that I can be the guy that Glenn Brenner said I could be. My first interaction with Glenn, who was a legendary sportscaster in D.C., he was very funny. He turned the mundane into must-see TV. And we had a similar style of humor. My voice is crackling. Bobby Brady, for those folks who don't watch the Brady Bunch. It just popped, and that was it. And off we went. And let me tell you, that first year at Augusta, besides the death threats, I was trying a whole lot of stuff, including, when I said, I think I referenced God in something, and I got the finger down the long hallway to the manager's office. In the
South, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Listen, son, this is the Bible Belt. You don't say God. I said, "Gotcha. Understand." And then the next night in the air, I said, "Oh my gosh." And I got the finger, "Gosh, too close to God." I'm like, okay. All right. Gotcha. So I was doing some boundaries here, trying to figure out where I fit in. But got it done.
Now, let me ask you this, right? Because you talk about that hesitation or that not being sure whether you were ready, but that's hard to imagine, Chick, because at your own acknowledgement all throughout high school, you were entertaining. You knew that you could hold an audience. You knew that you were that guy and that eyes would be on you. So I wonder why it is that you had that level of self-doubt. Did that have anything to do with the fact that you were a minority and that you were playing at this different table, and so that maybe you wanted to try to fit in instead of being yourself?
Well, I definitely was aware of where my skin color stood in the business. So when I get to Maryland, and while I was a class clown, I was also very, very shy. Like, talking to adults was not a thing that I did much, other than my mother. I almost to a near stutter when I had to address adults. But I was, once I was telling jokes or one-liners or vamping up with somebody else, it was easy. But I didn't. The first 2 years of Maryland, I didn't even go to the radio station. They had auditions, and I would go up to the door and see the sign, and too bashful. And then when I joined a fraternity, I got some confidence, being the athletic chairman of the house. But so when I go to do radio at University of Maryland, calling basketball, I changed my name. Once again, changing my name. Here we go. Here comes the government name. The government name is Carlos Hernandez. So I changed it to Carl Hearn. I just took the first two syllables of each name, because I figured Carl Hearn will get a job.
That's right.
More so than Carlos Hernandez at that time, for sure.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I got into business when Chick popped up. That's another story too. I was aware. I was definitely aware of how difficult it was going to be. At least, the way it was reported to me was that, it's going to be difficult to break in. But I did have the knowledge and the confidence that, like, I didn't think people could, from what I saw on TV, I thought to myself, they don't have what I have. Some obviously did, but they don't have the quick-witted enough, or the desire or the chance taking that I would take. So I was always about, and am still about, the entertainment factor and the wow factor. And did you see what he did? That's right. That's how folks thought about Glenn. When I walked the streets of Augusta, Georgia, after that first few months of heinous activity, by the time a year and a half rolled around, I couldn't go to dinner out. I could go out, but I wasn't going to eat, because everybody and their mother literally would come up to the table. Like, when I took women on dates, I had to go out of town somewhere and find a small spot, because I became big fish, small pond.
Yeah.
And which was good. I mean, that's the goal, Sure. And that's one of the reasons why coming back home was great, because now I was small fish, big pond.
Big pond.
Didn't have to worry about it. But no, I was definitely aware of where I stood. But I also knew, because of what happened in Augusta, the first few weeks, people like making, ridiculous comments. But, popular TV guy. TV's an idiot box. They forget. Mm-hmm. Like, they almost don't see color after, Now, news-wise, political-wise, different story. Sports-wise, they just forget, this guy's entertaining me, and I became everybody's best friend. And they felt like they knew me because of the job. That was my goal, was to make them feel like they knew me. When I came here and got married to my high school sweetheart, we'd be out somewhere in DC, and they would say, "Hey, Chick," blah, 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 and my wife would go, "Well, how you know them?" I go, "I don't know them, but you're polite, and they feel like they know you, and you can't be a jerk about it. At least I choose not to be. I wasn't raised that way. I've seen it enough. So yeah."
So quick follow up to that, and then I'll pass it back over to Darrell. You talk about, once you did begin to allow for your personality to shine through, and obviously being a man of color down in Augusta, once you get this death threat, did that ever harken in your mind that maybe at that point you should pull it back? Or was that more ammunition that you knew that you were on the right track?
I seriously think, because of that news anchor, Rick Sykes, the way he talked to me that night, saying that my people are stupid, to not take it with a grain of salt. And that one talk kind of set me on a path of like, all right, I'm not going to worry about this kind of thing. Really, it's just like, it's part of the business. This is, prior to social media. If they got through on a phone line. No, it didn't shake me. Once I got that talk from Rick, it didn't shake me. And my goal was, like I said, to be popular enough that wasn't going to be the case, and it wasn't ever again. So no, I did. I had a mission. I wanted to be a pro athlete. I was told in 11th grade by a Temple scout you could have a scholarship to play wideout. With our school, you just have to grow 6 inches. And I went, I'm like, really? And I never did. I didn't grow another freaking inch. So, the next best thing was to be involved in sports in another way.
That's excellent.
And so that's, so no, I wasn't, other than that, those first 30 seconds after that initial death threat, I was fine. I mean, literally that last year in Augusta, I felt like I was the dude. And even ironically, another phone call came my last year, and a guy called and wanted to speak to me, and I thought, okay, what's going on? And this guy wanted to commit suicide.
Wow.
And I didn't go on the air that night because he called at like 10:30-ish, 10:35 in the evening, and I alerted the news director that I'm going to stay on this line and talk with this guy. And so we talked and talked and talked, and I could hear noise in the background, and I realized it was a payphone. We had called the Augusta police, and then I heard the police show up, and he was mad at me at first. He's like, "Oh, Chick, I can't believe you did this." But I'm like, "You called me for a reason." And, we got it done. So those are 2 different phone calls, vastly different phone calls in my short time in Augusta.
Wow.
I have one more before we get into a little game we like to play.
Okay.
Called the 2-minute drill. We'll get into that in a couple minutes. We've spoken a lot about life and career, and we just touched on race and how that played a factor in your life, especially your early life.
Yeah.
Because you've talked about your father too, and how you grew up with a single mother who was white, and you didn't.
Oh, God, was she? Oh, yeah, she was. Okay.
And you didn't know your father for years until you discovered him, if that's the proper word. You discovered who he was, and it wasn't like you knew him, but like millions of people around the world also knew him. When you went and saw him play, it was at a club in Georgetown.
Yeah, Blues Alley.
Just talk about that story, really.
Yeah,
fast.
I was raised by a white single mother, who she was a badass. I mean, she went to Richard Montgomery High School, and her senior year, her and her best friend senior year would go to New York and club. Okay, this is this woman. And then she met this dude, and they went out for 2.5 years. And she met him at a club. He was playing at the club, and she got pregnant. And she basically told him, "You're not the fathering type. I got it. I got this kid. I'll take care of the kid. You just do you." They basically broke up because she just knew that his lifestyle was not going to be conducive to being a stay-at-home dad for sure. And so I knew of him as a youngster. We were supposed to meet one time when I was 13. She said that he was going to come over, and I took my bike and I rode around the neighborhood, and then I just parked up on top of the neighborhood, and I just watched the apartment door, and some guy showed up, and I thought, okay, this must be him. And then, when he left, I showed up like 10 minutes later, and again, Mom, the badass, she goes, I saw you up there on the hill, because it wasn't him. It was his agent. Like, he couldn't make it. I'm like, okay. So when I became a dad, it was the moment for me where you know what? I'm going to start. His name was Carlos Patato Valdez. He was a musician. He basically is one of the guys that invented the conga drum that you see today, the tunable conga drum. Mm-hmm. So I start to look him up because it's easy now. It was easy then. I'm 34-ish, somewhere in there. So I'm, just Google him. And okay, he lives in New York. Here's where he's playing, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, oh, look, he did a movie with Bridget Bardot. I'm like, what? So I buy this movie and I'm watching it, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, there he is in the scene. He teaches Bridget Bardot how to Mamba, and I'm looking at the date when this movie was made, and I'm trying to figure out his age. And so it's like I'm 34 years old watching my 34-year-old father. And
wow.
I was like, holy crap, this is weird. And then I did an event for Boys and Girls Club in Virginia and met this young lady who's a DJ of Latin music. And, you know, I was like, oh, what do you play? And she goes, blah, blah, blah. I said, do you ever play Patato Valdez? And she goes, yeah, Thursday night. That's, we play him a lot on Thursday night. I'm like, that's my father. She's like, what? And I start telling her story. Well, at the end of the story, she's bawling. I'm like, this is my story, not your story. What are you doing? And literally, I would say a year and a half later, I got a voicemail. I'm at the beach with my family, and I checked the voicemail, and it says, hey, this is so-and-so. I don't know if you remember me, but I'm not sure if you met your father or not yet, but he's playing Blues Alley in 2 nights in Georgetown. And I was like, hung up the phone. I looked at my wife and said, my father is going to be at Blues Alley. And she's like, you got to go. I'm like, I think I do. So I went, and I called my mom and said, hey, I'm doing this. And she said, can I come? I'm like, sure. And then she called her friend, the one she ran around with back in the day. They were still close friends. I hadn't seen that friend in 20 years. So we're all 3 standing in line at Blues Alley. And I thought, this is too surreal. And we go in. I sit about 10 feet from his drums, and he's the headline act. So his band plays for like 45 minutes. He's not there. I'm like, all right. My mom keeps asking me, are you going to say anything to him? I'm like, I don't know. I just want to see him play. And then they introduce him, and the entire time he was back at the bar behind us. Didn't know it. He walks out, and look, at 5'6", I'm considered short. I'm a giant. He was 4'11". Okay? Tiny dude. I'm lucky to be 5'6", because my mom was 5'5", so I got the height in the family. And he played awfully slow, and my mom and her friend Jackie were like, ooh, I don't know if you say anything to him. He's old, and he might give him a heart attack. I'm like, relax, just let me watch him play. And at the end, I said, I'm going to say something. And it just so happens that a mutual friend of ours, this guy Paul Hawkins, who was a DC conga drum player, he saw me. Actually, I saw him. I said, hey, Paul. And he turned, he looked at me, and looked at our table, and he goes, oh, my God. And he just kept going back and forth. He goes, I know why you're here. I go, yeah, can you facilitate this meeting? Because I can't speak Spanish, and he don't speak English, basically. And Paul says, Patato, tu hijo, your son? And they're like, ¿qué? Tu hijo? And all hell breaks loose, dude. All hell breaks loose. They're all crying and hugging. They forgot about me. It was a comedy. It was a comedy. I'm like this going, okay, I'll wait. No, anybody wanna? Nope. Okay. And it's a good 4 minutes. Finally, like, he turns to me, and I go to hug him, and that's when I realize how small he is. Yeah. And then the rest of the night is a blur. We stayed for the second show, and invited him over for dinner. He couldn't do it because he was playing with the Boston Symphony the next day, which is an odd combination. And then so I said, cool, well, we've got our numbers, and the agent will be our translator. We'll just do a 3-way, and then but then the next day at like 4:30, the agent called and said, what are you guys doing? I said, we're just thinking about what to make for dinner. He says, you got room for 2 more? Like, what do you mean? He goes, he didn't get on the plane. He's coming. Wow. So he met his grandkids, and we spoke for about 2 years on the phone. He was coming to GW, the Lisner Auditorium, to play, where he was scheduled to play and then give me the drums afterwards, and then got sick on a plane. They had to make an emergency landing in Cleveland, and turns out he had emphysema and was gone in 2 weeks. Man. But I was so happy, and I'm so happy that I got a chance to have a relationship, even fleeting as it was. And people always say, oh, did you miss having a father? Hell no, because my mom was my mother and father. Right. She was great. And while my best friends had dads, it wasn't something that I pined for. Maybe ignorance there, but I was my own dude. I was a latchkey kid. Mom went to work. I went and played, did my thing. But yeah, that was a interesting time. And then from that, every now and again, so the funny part was we go to his celebration of life in New York. Me and my mom take the train up to New York, sit in the back, one of the back rows, and I'm like watching this whole thing take place. And then at some point, 30 guys just get up and start walking towards us. And I'm like, okay, what are we doing here? And then they each went and they greeted my mother, and they greeted me. because I didn't know what anybody knew about me. And then a couple of the young guys took me aside and said, "Let me tell you about your father." And I think he was probably 82, somewhere in there. And they said, "This dude," and I'm wearing a baseball cap, but I used to always wear a pork pie of some sort. That's my kind of signature, right? I've always worn a hat. And they said, "This dude, a hat wearing, non-sleeping mofo." Like they would party and rage till 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, and at 7:30 in the morning, he's like, "Oh yeah, we got to go to the next city." Like he doesn't sleep. I'm like, sounds familiar.
That's me.
Yeah. So
Me.
yeah. So it was good. It was good. I got a chance to, and there's some stuff that still takes place online, and I get wind of it, and it's cool. And there's a bunch of stuff online of him dancing on top of conga drums and stuff like that. It's just crazy.
Chick, this is this will be my final question again before Darrell has a moment, but this is kind of cathartic for me. It's there are so many mirror-like instances in our lives. I too am someone whose father, biological father, wasn't around. I met my biological father once when I was 17, 18 years old before I went off to college, and although my mother was all that I ever needed, I do feel as though not having my dad in the house led to some identity questions for me that I had to answer for myself or grow to answer throughout my entire life. So I wonder if that was the same with you, and then even more importantly, whether that led you to desire to give back not only to your children, but also to the community in terms of leaving your legacy in maybe a way that your father wasn't able to in the house with you.
I don't think that was a factor for me. Like I said, and you just said, my mom, I didn't miss not having a father. The only identity crisis I had was growing up. Most of look, I'm a light-skinned brother, right? So I could traverse all the different cultures. I had the skin color, had the last name of Hernandez. I was a jock. I was a thespian. I did all that stuff. So, it was, a man of many masks. I think at some point, most of my friends in elementary school were white. And I had a few black friends, that's just the way the mix of the school was. So every now and again, I thought about that. And then as I got older, it's actually the Cuban side of me was like, I'd hear the Spanish language. And while I can't speak it per se, I can understand a great deal of it. And that kind of tugged at me like, where's, I don't have that heritage because my white, mother, English speaking mother, there was none of that. So I felt like I lost some of that. That's what I was missing. The racial component wasn't a thing because my mom taught me at a young age, if I grab your hand walking down the street, we're going to hear things. That's how it was back in the day. And that's, and I've told the story 1,000 times being in Baskin Robbins on Piney Branch Road as a youngster, too not tall enough to get my chin over the counter, but my eyes could see. And then, getting my mint chocolate chip ice cream, 2 scoops in a cone. And then hearing my mother say the words, "Put it in her hand, put it in her hand." And I look up and it's a black woman who's a customer, and the white lady behind the counter just kept tossing the change on the counter, wouldn't put it in her hand. And my mom's like, what are you afraid of? You think it's going to rub off? Put it in her hand. And I'm like too young to understand what's really going on. I just know that there's some tension here. And then she finally puts it in her hand and we walk outside, and then the lady comes out and she hugged my mother and she's crying. And I have to ask, what's going on? And my mom explained to me, and I'm like, okay. So that's where I came from. So I don't think I ever missed any of that. I think, calling it giving back to the community. I never wanted to embarrass my mother, through my actions. So she taught me that. And quite frankly, James Brown, when he was at Channel 9, a guy who, when you meet, you go, that's just not possible. That person can be that nice. Just there's got to be some fakeness here somewhere. You know, the birth of my 3 children, all announced on TV. The first voicemails from JB going, "You're so blessed," you know, and willing to help me out when I'm in Augusta, Georgia, to find an agent. This guy's big time at Fox at that point. I watched him give back. He's a man of faith. I'm not particularly a man of faith, but I watched him practice it. So guys like that kind of led me through that door. And again, I'm a funny guy. I don't find I find people who express hate and all that stuff distasteful. And if someone younger than I wants to get in the business, wants something, you know, wants to learn, wants to know how I did it, why I did it, blah, 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 why wouldn't I share that with them? And, you know, I raised money for men supporting women with cancer, not because my wife's a survivor. It was something that somebody asked me to do, and I thought, that's a good cause. We're all touched by cancer. I got it now. I'm fighting it now. So I'm like, wow. Okay. So yeah, it was just my upbringing. My mom was, you know, she worked in a phone company where men tried to get her out because she was a person in authority by the time she was done. But so many men respected her because of the way she led, and that showed me, you know, you've got to treat people with respect. And if someone wants your time, if you can do it, you do it. And you also got to be that person that says, I cannot do it right now, but I can later. Be happy to. And if they take the road of, well, you're big time me, that's on them.
Sure.
I'm telling you, I can do it later. I can't do it now. Happy to later. And most people go, oh, cool, let's exchange information. And that's what that's what I do now while I'm having fun calling games for CBS. It's just, you know, it's a lot of, there's no juice, as I told Darrell, there's no juice like calling a game. You know, studio stuff I did for many, many years. That was fun. The pregame shows, the postgame shows were outrageous because of that Washington football franchise and what they did or didn't do, you know, and working with Bree Mitch and Trevor Maddich. Yeah, and that was a blast. But doing a game,
really,
you know, doing the prep for the game is the hard part. Oh,
so, again, obviously not at your level, but I do play by play as well. I prefer the studio stuff, man.
Really?
Play by play for me is like, you know, it's fun, but I like the studio given my druthers.
I understand, but you see, and I will. What do they call it? I'll Bigfoot you a little bit. I've done that. I've done it.
Yeah.
You know, I did it, and I did it in every extreme situation. Outdoors at FedEx Field.
Sure.
Wins and losses. Wizards. Washington football. I can't call them that C word. You know, Maryland basketball, studio, on the road. I've done it all. Now there's just something about being in an arena. You've prepped, and I'm going to use 20% of my prep, which I know going in, but I'm not going to be unprepared in case something untoward happens and there's a big delay. But you know, it's you know, I called Mark Turgeon, former Maryland coach. I did his first game. He was my analyst for Toledo and Ball State, and you know, this guy's coached for 35 years. And at the first time out, he whips his headset off and just turns to me and goes, holy shit, this game moves fast. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You coached for 35 years. He goes, no. On the sideline, it's all here. And I'm directing it, you know, as much as I can. He goes, now there's a guy in your ear telling you what you're doing next if you're going to commercial or the promo you're going to read. And he says, I don't know how you do it. You got a laptop, which has stats. You got a stat guy next to you who's also giving you notes. You got me, who you got to weave into this thing. Because I don't know how you do it. I said, well, that's the beauty of it. It's happening, and it's like this. And on great games, man, it's just, you know, it goes by so fast, and you know, you hope you nail it. You know, football, I'd called a Hail Mary pass, didn't expect the Hail Mary, didn't expect it. When I look back at it, I will say this: I set it up as well as anybody could, because the quarterback was a guy who was leading the nation in touchdown passes, but he's on his own 45-yard line. And I literally said, if there's one guy you want in this situation, it's the guy who's got the most touchdown passes in the country. Touchdown, game over, out of control, you know? So all that prep work. So I like it now. Listen, Chad, they won't hire me in studio anymore. Okay, they got the gray. I got a little edge to me now. It's not just humor. I might shoot some stuff. So a lot of executives. I worked at Fox 5 back in the day. I can't get a call back.
I know you did, brother. I know you did. Like I said, you're paving a road for me all through here, bro.
Well, I listen. You're doing what you're supposed to do. By the way, how do you know Beth Modorsky?
On the weekends, I also host bar and bat mitzvahs, brother. So
okay.
Did for the last 15 years, as I was making my way into television, I somehow found the bar and bat mitzvah world, and I did both of their children's bar and bat mitzvahs.
Nice.
Yes. Or bar mitzvahs for them. Got
yes. Yeah, Beth was a producer in Augusta with me back in the day.
Was she?
Yeah.
That I did not know.
Yeah.
Wow. Small world.
Yeah, we'll have to talk off camera at some point.
No, let's do it. Okay, again, Darrell has something, but you just said something, and I would be remiss if I did not ask you this. With everything, with the prep work, with everything, what was your final takeaway of your tag team partner with the Wichita State incident? Now, I've listened to that tape, and I know that you were kind of looped in the broadcast team, and I'm obviously not asking you to throw your partner under the bus, but to me, that didn't feel like you. To me, that felt like him, and yet you were caught in the same fire as him on it.
It's, and for folks who don't know, we were calling the Wichita State game. I can't talk too much on it because I don't want to,
Well, that's why I left it very vanilla.
It literally was just a misspeak by both of us, and I think because of the situation, there were powers that be that wanted to make more of it, and we talked to the young man the next day, apologized face to face with him. And we kind of moved on. Again, powers that be, besides me, my partner, and the young player, there were people outside there that wanted to make more of it. And so we just, we let it lie, and it quieted down in about 2-3 days. But that's social media. That's simply, a guy clipped off 13 seconds of what we said to make it sound like something that was so out of context.
Correct.
We're like, oh, okay. And, it was my first time really dealing with it from that standpoint. So I'm fully aware.
Well, because that's what I'm watching it and knowing a little bit about your life, and I'm looking at the social media clip, and you've got guys, look at the racist. I'm like, really? Chick Hernandez?
That's how bad it was, is that folks, they all started to jump on. And, of course, they all said, I bet it's two white guys. Well, it wasn't. It was, in fact, the opposite. But so it wasn't anything that was intentional. And certainly, as I told the young man, Isaiah Poor Bear Chandler, if you're hurt, then we did it. Yeah. And it's simple as that. And we apologize. We weren't intending for that to be that. So we worked it out. But that's this day and age. And I certainly understood. And CBS backed me. I mean, we had phone calls, and I was despondent. I didn't sleep. But they said, we understand what took place. And, the young man talked about your apology. And so we're fully on board with, don't worry about your job, blah, blah, blah. And in fact, offer me 2 more games. So, but it's you got to be careful in today and what you say. We've seen time in, time out, news, sports, all of it. It is what it is at this point. There's certainly a cancer culture out there. I'm watching, PGA Tour, Live Tour, all that stuff. It's taking place. It's a whole different ballgame. I'm so glad. I'm sure you've heard older people in the business say, I'm so glad that we didn't have cameras back in the day when I was in high school.
Yeah, man.
Well, Chick, it's been a pleasure having you. It's been a pleasure meeting you.
Absolutely.
Getting to know you, for sharing your story. We're really thankful for that, and we appreciate you coming on. We're definitely going to stay in contact. But what we like to do here at First and Told, to end our show and at the very end of our interviews, we play a little game called the 2-minute drill.
Okay.
So basically, I'm going to put 2 minutes on the clock, and I'm just going to ask you rapid fire questions. The first answer that comes to your mind, just have to say it to us. Nothing Moses-like, nothing like that's going to get you in trouble.
Oh, it's all good.
Whatever comes to mind.
7 names, my senior year. 7 names I had.
All right. Ready?
Yep.
2 minutes on the clock starting now. Okay. What is your all-time favorite sports memory?
2002 national championship covering the Maryland Terrapins. Win the game.
That was a great one. What is your most memorable interview of all time?
The only interview I've ever been. Actually, you know what? Most memorable, Dr. Len Bias's mother, who said to me during the interview, "I can't explain to you what it's like to bury one son while standing on my other son's grave."
Wow. One person you would like to interview?
Like to interview? You know what? There ain't one. I've interviewed everybody that I want.
I love it. We talked about this a bit offline earlier, but your favorite road city?
Favorite road city?
Yeah, favorite city to travel to when you're covering games.
San Francisco.
Yep, that was what you said.
There's a great golf course there. I left my clubs there for 2 weeks. It was awesome.
So that actually kind of leads into my next question. Aside from golf, what do you do in your spare time?
That's it. I grill steak and chicken.
There we go. Golfing, probably. You probably have a golf club.
I wish. If they could do that, then my wife would never see me.
If you could go back in history and call any game, any sport, what game would it be?
Wow. Any game, any sport. I would call Jack Nicklaus's last major in 1986 at the Masters.
What makes D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, the DMV, so special?
The diversity.
What is one thing on your bucket list that you have not done?
Played in a Champions Tour event on the golf circuit. Look at that. Come on.
Look at that.
Nailed it. Nailed that thing. Hey, listen, I'm all about when the producer says rap, I get
know
off.
You got it.
Yeah,
In our business, by the way.
Done right now. We're supposed to be done right now. I want 30 more seconds. What is your message to all up-and-coming broadcast journalists out there who aspire to one day be where you've been and where you are now? Give me 30 seconds of advice to them.
My advice is to know that you want to do it. It's got to be a passion, one, and then be prepared, two. If you're not prepared, you cannot wing it. You can wing certain things, but it's going to come back to bite you in the ass if you don't prepare properly. So you do your due diligence, and if it's something that you're not comfortable with, get comfortable with it. You can do that. You're an intelligent person. Get comfortable with it. That's it. Those are the two things, passion and preparation. And in the end, treat everybody that's with you with respect.
That's what's up. That's what's up. I love it. Chick Hernandez, it has been, this has been everything that I hoped that it would be. Thank you so very much for joining Darrell and I here today on First and Told.
Appreciate y'all. I love to see the young guys in the business doing their thing. And hopefully we'll talk down the road, about anything and everything.
That's what's
Definitely. Up. We sure will. Thank you, Chick.
All right. Peace out, boys.
Ricardo Report, bruh.